It's going to be painful. It's going to be bumpy.
We're going to have to adapt our lives.
COVID-19 is not going away anytime soon.
This just feels like a huge natural experiment unfolding in real time.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
You must stay at home.
It's just an incredible situation.
This is a disease of globalization. It spreads through the channels that we have created. And this is a disease that does not respect borders of nationality, class, or ethnic grouping. Going back to the old way of operating is going to have cataclysmic consequences for the economy as a whole, for society as a whole, and for all social classes within it.
I think the difference between this crisis and 2008, because I think many people thought 2008 was going to be that reckoning, partly because of the shock of it, partly because it completely exposed the kind of frailty of the banking system and it exposed the kind of underlying weaknesses of the economy. Where I think there is a difference is I think the crisis they're about to undergo is going to be more profound. It's going to be deeper than 2008. 2008 was a kind of crisis in the financial sector and the banking sector that then gradually had an impact on people, primarily through the way the government had to respond and things like austerity. Whereas this crisis hits ordinary people first and foremost. It is a crisis of the real economy. It will feel far more profound and painful than 2008 did.
We've seen a dramatic, possibly unprecedented change in people's behaviour in this country and indeed worldwide, where an estimated half of the world's population has been in lockdown. One of the questions is to what extent will those behaviours endure? It's estimated that about 40% of our behaviour in any day is routine or habitual. So it occurs at around the same time, same place, when probably we're thinking about something else. And it's estimated that to acquire a new habit or routine takes about 6 weeks, but there's huge variation in that. So it's highly likely that some of the behaviours we're now engaging in will stick.
We will need to adjust to a new normal.
A new normal.
A new normal.
A new normal.
A whole new world.
Where we as a society adapt to safe new ways to work, to travel, to interact, and to go about our daily lives.
People have managed to change their behaviour in the context of this immediate threat. So we know that hand washing has gone up significantly. We know that cleaning of homes in terms of cleaning products as well as soaps have gone up as well.
Sewer systems, clean water, housing regulation, paved streets, the whitewashing of houses, all these sorts of features were taken as a result of the disease experience of the first half of the 19th century.
We also need to think about minimal touching, because in shared spaces, transmission of the virus is possible by touching shared surfaces. So hastening contactless environments, and where we can't do that, redesigning, for instance, doors so that they don't require a hand, maybe operated by arm or foot. With work, we may look towards more flexible working hours. Public transport is a space where transmission is far more likely than when walking through a park. What we've learned is walking outside to avoid strangers like the plague, as we used to say. I don't know how long it will take for us to not be jumpy every time there's somebody coming around the corner, whether we will go back to shaking hands with people. Men and younger people are less fearful, less concerned. And so I will predict that they will be the groups who will go first into larger spaces.
It is now very likely that the UK economy is facing a significant recession.
Many people are likening it to the Great Depression. I think we're likely to see a recession that is not only deep, but kind of long.
I think this could be a transformative event with regard to industrial capitalism and the kind of economic society and the way that we do business.
The impact will be much, much more profound in economies in the North and Midlands, against the backdrop where these local economies are already struggling. The sectors that are going to be most affected by this, retail, hospitality, leisure, they're spread across the country, but you have a higher concentration in the North and Midlands relative to kind of professional services.
Although we're all vulnerable, some people are much more vulnerable, and that's a huge part of the story of this pandemic. It's not an equal opportunity, and the poor are being devastated at a rate that is staggering compared to wealthier parts of society.
The big debate at the end of this is, with a deficit of somewhere in the region of 200 to 300 billion, do we shift to an austerity tax, or do we say we've got to invest our way out of this?
Pandemics and climate change are not unconnected. The two are actually linked. The pandemic, arising deforestation and wildlife trade, which increases the risk of viruses crossing species boundaries, and air travel that helps the viruses to spread.
Our profligate devastation of the environment around us, of our planet, has profound effects on the relationships between humans and animal species. This is the story of avian flu with wildfowl. It's the story of MERS. It's the story of Ebola and bats and human beings. It's the story of COVID-19, and there's a pattern there, and it's not by chance.
There are lots of downsides and few opportunities in the current crisis, but one of the opportunities is to recalibrate in order to prepare for climate change. And the aviation sector, for me, is a classic example on a number of fronts. So we're now at the stage where every single aviation industry in every part of the world is going to be asking for some sort of state support.
Aviation is an important sector to the economy, but it is a sector facing almost unprecedented issues as a result of coronavirus.
The government has a choice about whether you just hand them out a bailout with no conditions, or you use it in order to force changes in the aviation sector.
There are some concerns that perhaps with the rush to get back to particularly to get the economy going again, that we might want to forget about climate change. And I think it's absolutely vital that we don't.
One of the responses to the economic crisis unleashed by COVID-19 has been a huge policy of disinvestment in third world countries, and that has caused enormous poverty. We see hunger and possibly mass starvation as possibly being consequences of all of this.
If this does take root in the global south and we choose to turn our back on it and do nothing about it, it is very hard to contain in the global south. It will rebound back onto other countries. So the need for solidarity is predicated in the fact that fundamentally, because we do have a more globalized world, the pace at which this thing has kind of moved from continent to continent shows that we cannot act in isolationist terms.
It has the potential, clearly, to cause things as profound as failed states. profound geopolitical insecurity. There is the potential there for civil strife on a massive scale and warfare, with who knows what sorts of repercussions, ripple effects around the world.
We see people basically pulling up their borders and everyone looking inwards in order to basically protect their own national populations and economies and society. But on the other side, everyone recognizes that we can't find a way out of this pandemic unless there is international cooperation. The polling suggests that actually people now, the sense that we must collaborate with our partners in order to solve crisis, public support for that has gone up.
Millions have either lost their income or significantly it's a significant reduction in how much income they have coming into the family. So a tremendous increase in use of food banks, and of course those with poor mental health. So we're not all in this together. For those who are in the most vulnerable groups in our society, our safety nets weren't good enough, and we need to shore those up for next time.
Reconfiguring the way that we carry out our business, run our economy, and have relationships between third world countries and the first world, those are not sustainable in the way that they are being conducted at the moment. And I think this disease is going to cause a rethinking. In what directions, it's not entirely clear, but going back to the past is not, and maintaining the present, those aren't really options that are viable.
We are in a crisis that's absolutely unprecedented, that is profound, that is shocking in many ways, that's forcing us to rethink so many of our assumptions. And so if we get to the other side of this, it's going to be painful, it's going to be bumpy, but if out of that comes a better sort of economy, if out of that comes a recognition that we've got to respond and prepare for climate change, then there is light at the end of the darkness.